The moment my father called me a burden was the moment I realized I had spent my entire life fighting for a place that was never truly mine. Emily Carter stood silently inside the grand dining hall of the Carter family estate, surrounded by elegant furniture, expensive decorations, and people who carried the Carter name with pride. It was supposed to be a celebration of the family's future. Instead, it became the night Emily finally understood the truth about her place in their world. Her father, Richard Carter, looked across the room with a serious expression. For years, Emily had hoped that one day he would see her efforts, her kindness, and everything she had done to support the family. She had spent countless hours helping behind the scenes, organizing projects, studying company information, and solving problems before anyone even noticed they existed. But in her father's eyes, those things were never enough. "Emily is a good person," Richard said in front of the guests. "But kindness does not make someone capable of carrying the Carter legacy." The words were polite, but they carried a painful message. Emily lowered her eyes as everyone remained silent. She was not angry. She was simply tired of trying to prove she deserved to be seen. Her entire life, she had watched others receive opportunities while she was told to be patient. She was the daughter people remembered only when something needed to be fixed. She was the person everyone expected to help, but nobody expected to lead. "The future of this family requires someone stronger," Richard continued. "Someone who can represent our name properly." Emily looked around the room one last time. She searched for a familiar face, someone who would say that he was wrong. Nobody did. At that moment, she realized the hardest truth was not being rejected by strangers. It was being overlooked by the people she loved. That evening, Emily packed a small suitcase and left the Carter estate. She did not leave with anger or a desire for revenge. She left because she finally understood that she could not spend her whole life waiting for people to recognize her worth. As she walked through the city streets of New York, the bright lights reflected around her, but she felt strangely calm. For the first time, she was not living according to someone else's expectations. She was free to discover who she really was. What Emily did not know was that someone had already noticed the qualities her family ignored. High above the city, inside the private office of Kingsley Empire, Alexander Kingsley looked through a report that had caught his attention. The world knew him as the richest emperor, a man who controlled one of the largest business empires in the country. People saw his success, his influence, and his power, but very few people knew the person behind the title. Alexander had met countless individuals who wanted something from him: wealth, connections, status. But Emily Carter was different. She helped people without expecting recognition. She made difficult choices without seeking praise. She showed strength without needing attention. "Interesting," Alexander said quietly as he looked at her information. To everyone else, Emily Carter was the daughter who was not enough. To Alexander, she was someone who had been underestimated for far too long. The next morning, Emily received an unexpected message. It came from the Kingsley Empire. She stared at the invitation, confused and uncertain. She had never met Alexander Kingsley. She had no idea why a man with everything would want to speak with someone who had just lost her place in her own family. But as Emily accepted the invitation, she did not realize that the person who had been called a burden was about to meet the man who would change her entire future. The invitation from Kingsley Empire felt impossible to understand. Emily Carter sat quietly in her small apartment, looking at the message on her phone again and again. A few days earlier, she had left the only home she had ever known because she finally accepted that her family would never see her the way she hoped they would. Now, the richest emperor in the country wanted to meet her. Emily wondered if there had been a mistake. She was not a famous business leader. She did not come from a powerful position. She was simply Emily, the daughter who had spent years standing behind everyone else. But something inside her told her that this opportunity was different. The next morning, Emily arrived at Kingsley Tower. The building stood above the city like a symbol of power and success. Every person walking through the entrance seemed confident and certain about their place in the world. Emily took a deep breath as she entered. She reminded herself that she was not there to prove she deserved to exist. She was there because someone had asked to meet her. A member of Alexander Kingsley's team guided her to the private office at the top of the building. When the doors opened, Emily saw the man whose name appeared in every major business headline. Alexander Kingsley stood near the large windows overlooking New York. His presence was calm and powerful, but there was something about his expression that felt different from the image people saw in the media. "Emily Carter," Alexander said. "Thank you for coming." Emily looked at him carefully. "I have to admit, I am curious why you wanted to meet me." Alexander walked toward the desk and placed several documents in front of her. "Because I wanted to understand the person behind the name." Emily looked at the papers. They contained information about projects she had worked on, suggestions she had made, and improvements she had quietly created for the Carter family business. She looked surprised. "How did you find these?" Alexander answered calmly. "Because I pay attention to things others ignore." Those words stayed with her. Her entire life, Emily had felt invisible. She had always believed her efforts disappeared because they were not important enough. But Alexander saw something different. "Your family believes you are a burden," Alexander said. Emily became quiet. Hearing those words from someone else still hurt. "But I see someone who understands responsibility," he continued. "Someone who can solve problems, support others, and remain kind even when nobody gives her credit." Emily looked away. She was not used to hearing someone describe her in that way. "Why does that matter to you?" she asked. Alexander looked toward the city below. "Because I have spent my life surrounded by people who want my power. It is rare to find someone who cares about the person behind it." Emily realized something in that moment. Alexander Kingsley was not simply a powerful man. He was someone who understood what it felt like to be seen only for what others wanted from him. "I want you to work with me," Alexander said. Emily looked surprised. "Why me? There are many people with more experience." Alexander smiled slightly. "Experience can be gained. Integrity cannot." Over the next few weeks, Emily began spending more time with the Kingsley Empire team. She discovered a world completely different from the one she knew. Decisions affected thousands of people. Every conversation carried importance. At first, some employees questioned why Alexander trusted someone from the Carter family. They expected someone inexperienced. Instead, they found a woman who listened carefully, thought deeply, and offered ideas others overlooked. Emily slowly began realizing something important. The qualities her family considered weaknesses were the same qualities Alexander valued most. Meanwhile, news about Emily's connection with Alexander reached the Carter family. Richard Carter could not believe that the daughter he dismissed was now being recognized by the most powerful man in the country. He thought Emily would eventually return. He thought she would need the family again. But Emily was discovering a new truth. She did not need someone else to decide her value. And Alexander Kingsley was about to make a decision that would completely change the direction of her life. The more time Emily Carter spent inside the Kingsley Empire, the more she realized that Alexander Kingsley had not invited her there because he needed someone to fill a position. He had invited her because he believed she had something valuable to offer. For the first time in her life, Emily was surrounded by people who listened when she spoke. But with that new opportunity came a new challenge. She had to learn how to stand in a world where every decision mattered. When Emily first joined the Kingsley Empire, many employees quietly questioned Alexander's choice. They respected his judgment, but they could not understand why he trusted someone who had never been part of the business elite. Emily noticed the doubts around her, but she refused to let them bring her back to the person she used to be. She had already spent enough years trying to prove herself to people who had decided not to see her. Now, she wanted to prove something only to herself. During an important company meeting, the leadership team discussed a difficult situation involving one of the company's upcoming projects. Several experienced executives shared their opinions, but none of the suggestions solved the problem completely. Emily listened carefully before offering a different perspective. She did not speak with arrogance. She simply explained what she noticed and why she believed another approach could work. The room became quiet. Some people looked surprised. Others began reviewing her ideas more closely. Alexander watched without interrupting. He already knew what the others were about to discover. Emily's strength was not in trying to control every situation. Her strength was in understanding what others overlooked. After the meeting ended, one of the executives approached her. "I have to admit, I did not expect that solution," he said. Emily smiled politely. Sometimes the answer is easier to see when you listen first. Later that evening, Alexander found Emily looking through documents in his private office. "You handled yourself well today," he said. Emily looked up. "I was nervous." Alexander seemed surprised. "You did not look nervous." She smiled softly. Being afraid and moving forward can happen at the same time. Those words stayed with Alexander. Most people around him tried to appear perfect. They wanted him to see confidence, ambition, and certainty. Emily was different. She did not pretend to have every answer. She simply had the courage to keep learning. "That is what makes you different," Alexander said. Emily looked at him. "Different how?" "You do not need everyone to believe in you before you believe in yourself." Emily became quiet because she knew he was right. Slowly, the distance between them began to change. Alexander was still the richest emperor, the man everyone respected and admired. But around Emily, he was able to be more than a title. He could simply be Alexander. Meanwhile, the Carter family continued watching Emily's transformation from a distance. Richard Carter saw reports about her involvement with the Kingsley Empire and struggled to understand how quickly everything had changed. The daughter he once considered incapable was now earning the respect of people around the world. But what bothered him most was realizing that Emily had never changed into someone else. She had always possessed those qualities. He had simply refused to notice them. One evening, Alexander invited Emily to a private dinner away from the pressure of the business world. For the first time, they spoke without discussing companies, responsibilities, or expectations. Emily learned about the loneliness hidden behind Alexander's success. Alexander learned about the years Emily spent feeling invisible. They discovered that despite living completely different lives, they shared the same feeling. They had both been surrounded by people who saw their positions before seeing them as individuals. As the evening ended, Alexander looked at Emily with a thoughtful expression. "I believe there is something important we need to discuss." Emily wondered what he meant. She had no idea that his next words would create a new chapter in both of their lives. The conversation Alexander Kingsley wanted to have with Emily Carter changed the direction of both their lives. After weeks of working together, they had developed a connection built on trust and understanding. Emily had entered the Kingsley Empire believing she was only someone who needed a second chance. But Alexander saw something different. He saw a woman who had the ability to stand beside him, not behind him. That evening, Alexander invited Emily to a quiet dinner overlooking the city. Away from business meetings and public attention, they were simply two people sharing their experiences. "I want to ask you something important," Alexander said. Emily looked at him with curiosity. "What is it?" Alexander paused for a moment before answering. "I need someone I can trust completely. Someone who understands the responsibility that comes with my position." Emily listened carefully. She expected a business discussion, but she sensed there was something deeper behind his words. Alexander explained that as the leader of the Kingsley Empire, many people approached him because of his wealth and influence. Finding someone who cared about the person behind the title had become rare. "You are different from everyone I have met," Alexander said. Emily looked down for a moment. "I'm not sure I understand why." Alexander smiled slightly. "Because you never tried to gain anything from me." Emily remembered the first time they met. She had not known his status. She had simply treated him with honesty and respect. That was something Alexander had not forgotten. Then he made a proposal that completely surprised her. Alexander wanted Emily to become his wife. The room became silent. Emily looked at him, unsure how to respond. "Your wife?" she asked. Alexander nodded. "I know this is unexpected. I am not asking because you need my protection, and I am not asking because of your family situation. I am asking because I believe you are the person who should stand beside me." Emily struggled to understand. She had spent her entire life being told she was not enough. Now, the most powerful man in the world was telling her that she was exactly what he had been looking for. "Is this only an arrangement?" Emily asked carefully. Alexander considered the question. "At first, perhaps we both need time to understand what this means. But my respect for you is real." Emily knew this decision would change everything. Becoming part of Alexander's world meant facing attention from people who would question her. It meant entering a life where every choice would be noticed. But for the first time, someone was not choosing her because of what she could provide. He was choosing her because of who she was. After careful thought, Emily accepted. The news of Alexander Kingsley's marriage announcement quickly spread throughout the world. Many people were surprised. They wondered who this woman was and why the richest emperor had chosen her. When the Carter family heard the news, Richard Carter was shocked. The daughter he had dismissed was now connected to the most powerful man in the country. He could not understand how the person he considered a burden had become someone Alexander trusted completely. Meanwhile, Emily prepared to enter a completely new chapter of her life. She knew challenges were ahead. She knew some people would judge her before knowing her. But she also knew something important. She was no longer the girl who waited for permission to matter. She was a woman who had finally found someone who saw her true value. And as Emily stepped into the world of the Kingsley Empire, she had no idea that her greatest transformation was only beginning. The announcement of Emily Carter's marriage to Alexander Kingsley changed the way the world saw her. Only a short time ago, she had been the daughter her own family considered a burden. Now she was preparing to stand beside the richest emperor in the country. But Emily knew that a new title did not erase the doubts people had about her. She understood that respect had to be earned, and she was ready to prove that she was not chosen because of luck. She was chosen because she belonged there. When Emily officially entered the Kingsley residence, she discovered a world completely different from anything she had known. The mansion was elegant, the staff was professional, and every detail represented Alexander's powerful position. Yet Emily quickly realized that behind the luxury was a man who valued simplicity more than appearances. Alexander did not treat her like someone who needed to be protected. He treated her as an equal. "You do not have to change who you are here," Alexander told her. "That is the reason I chose you." Those words meant more to Emily than he realized. For years, she had been told that she needed to become someone else to be accepted. Now, someone was telling her that the person she already was had value. However, entering Alexander's world came with challenges. The public wanted to know everything about the woman who became the emperor's wife. Some people questioned whether Emily was prepared for such a position. They believed she was only there because Alexander favored her. Emily saw the comments, but she refused to let them control her confidence. She remembered the girl who left the Carter estate with a small suitcase. That girl had felt invisible, but she was no longer that person. During her first major appearance beside Alexander, Emily faced a room filled with influential leaders and respected figures. Many expected her to remain silent. Instead, she spoke with calm confidence about the future of the Kingsley Empire and the importance of understanding people behind every business decision. Her words surprised many guests. They expected someone who depended on Alexander's reputation. Instead, they saw someone who had her own ideas and her own perspective. Alexander watched proudly as Emily showed the world who she truly was. Later that evening, he told her, "You realize you changed the way many people see you today." Emily smiled. "I was not trying to change their opinion. I was just being honest." Alexander looked at her with admiration. That was exactly what made her different. She did not chase approval. She simply followed what she believed was right. Meanwhile, the Carter family continued watching Emily's rise. Richard Carter struggled with the reality that his daughter had become someone the world respected. He remembered the night he called her a burden. He remembered believing she would never become strong enough to represent the family name. Now, he saw that he had misunderstood her completely. Emily had never lacked ability. She had only lacked someone willing to believe in her. As Emily and Alexander continued building their life together, their relationship slowly changed. What began as a decision based on trust became something deeper. Alexander discovered peace with someone who saw him beyond his wealth. Emily discovered confidence with someone who valued her beyond her achievements. But while they were creating a new future, the past was preparing to return. Richard Carter was about to make a decision that would bring him back into Emily's life. And this time, he would have to face the daughter he once failed to appreciate. The past that Emily Carter thought she had left behind slowly began finding its way back into her new life. For weeks, she had focused on building a future with Alexander Kingsley, learning about his world and discovering the confidence she never had before. She was no longer the daughter who waited for approval from people who ignored her. She was now the woman standing beside the richest emperor, respected for her own abilities. But one person from her past was still struggling to accept how much she had changed. Richard Carter watched every report about Emily's new position. He saw her appear beside Alexander at important events, speaking with confidence and earning the respect of people who once would have ignored her. Each moment reminded him of the mistake he had made. He had spent years believing Emily was too weak to carry the Carter name. Now he realized the truth was completely different. She had always carried qualities that the family needed. They simply refused to recognize them. One afternoon, Emily received a message from her father. She stared at the screen for a long time before opening it. "Emily, I would like to meet with you." Those words seemed simple, but they carried years of memories. She remembered the night she left the Carter estate. She remembered standing in that room while everyone accepted that she did not belong. Part of her wanted to ignore the message. Another part wanted answers. When Alexander noticed her quiet expression, he asked gently, "Is everything okay?" Emily showed him the message. Alexander did not tell her what choice to make. He simply asked, "What do you want?" Emily thought carefully. That question was different from what she was used to. In the past, people always decided what she should do. Now, someone trusted her to decide for herself. "I want to understand why," she said. The next day, Emily returned to the Carter estate. The place looked exactly the same, but she felt completely different. The halls that once made her feel small no longer had power over her. She was not returning as the daughter who needed acceptance. She was returning as a woman who already knew her worth. Richard was waiting for her in the family office. When he saw Emily enter, he became quiet. He expected to see the same daughter who left months earlier. Instead, he saw someone confident and peaceful. "You have changed," Richard said. Emily looked at him calmly. "I think I finally stopped trying to become someone you wanted me to be." Her words affected him deeply. Richard took a moment before speaking. "I made mistakes." Emily listened. She did not want excuses. She wanted honesty. "I believe strength only came from ambition and power," Richard admitted. "I did not understand that kindness, patience, and intelligence were also forms of strength." For the first time, Emily heard her father acknowledge what he had ignored for years. "I should have seen you," Richard said quietly. "You were never a burden." Emily felt the weight of those words. They were the words she once needed more than anything. But she had learned something important. Her value had never depended on whether someone else recognized it. Richard then revealed why he truly wanted to speak with her. The Carter family needed her help with an important decision. The same person they once overlooked was now the person they trusted most. Emily listened carefully, but she did not rush to answer. She was no longer the girl who would do anything to be accepted. She was a woman who could choose her own path. When she returned to the Kingsley residence, Alexander noticed something different in her expression. "How did it go?" he asked. Emily smiled softly. "I finally heard the words I waited for years to hear." Alexander looked at her. "And did it change everything?" Emily looked toward the city lights. "No, because I already changed before he said them." Alexander smiled, knowing that was the reason he admired her. But neither of them knew that the Carter family's request would soon reveal a truth that would completely change how everyone saw Emily Carter. The truth behind Emily Carter's past was about to change everything she thought she knew about herself. After her conversation with Richard Carter, Emily returned to the Kingsley residence with a different perspective. She no longer carried the same pain from the past. She had finally heard her father admit that he was wrong, but she also understood something. Even more important, her worth had never depended on his approval. However, the request from the Carter family remained unfinished. They needed Emily's help with a decision that could affect the future of their company. Emily agreed to review the situation, not because she wanted to return to the family she once begged to accept her, but because she believed people deserved help when it was the right thing to do. When Emily arrived at the Carter headquarters, the atmosphere felt different. Years earlier, she had walked through those doors as someone nobody noticed. Now, everyone looked at her with respect and curiosity. Employees who once ignored her ideas now recognized the person standing in front of them. Richard showed Emily several documents related to the family business. As she reviewed them, she quickly noticed something others had missed. The problems facing the company were not caused by a lack of resources. They came from decisions that ignored the importance of understanding people and long-term relationships. Emily carefully explained her thoughts. She did not criticize anyone. She simply shared the perspective she had developed through years of quietly observing the business. Richard listened carefully. For the first time, he was not trying to teach her. He was learning from her. "You always understood this better than I did," Richard admitted. Emily looked at him. "I spent years trying to tell you." Those words were not angry. They were simply the truth. Richard realized that the daughter he considered inexperienced had always been paying attention. She had always cared about the future of the family. The problem was that nobody gave her the chance to prove it. Meanwhile, Alexander watched Emily handle the situation with patience and confidence. He had always known she was special, but seeing her return to the place where she was once rejected showed him even more about her character. She could have used her new position to embarrass the people who hurt her. Instead, she chose understanding. You could have walked away and never looked back, Alexander told her later. Emily smiled. Maybe I could have. But becoming successful does not mean becoming someone I do not recognize. Alexander admired that answer. It reminded him why he trusted her from the beginning. Emily was not powerful because she had gained a title. She was powerful because she had remained true to herself. As the days passed, the story of Emily's contribution to the Carter family slowly became known. People discovered that many improvements made years earlier had come from her ideas. The daughter everyone called a burden had quietly been one of the most valuable people in the family. Richard faced the reality he had avoided for years. Emily had never been the weakness of the Carter family. She had been one of its greatest strengths. When the news reached the public, many people changed their opinions about Emily. She was no longer known only as the wife of the richest emperor. She was recognized as a woman with her own intelligence and achievements. That evening, Alexander and Emily stood together overlooking the city. Does it feel different now? Alexander asked. Emily thought for a moment. Yes, but not because they finally understand me. She looked at him and smiled. It feels different because I finally understand myself. Alexander knew that was the greatest change of all. But soon, Emily would face one final challenge. The world had discovered her value, but she still had to decide what kind of future she truly wanted to create. The world had finally begun to see Emily Carter differently, but Emily knew that the greatest change was not happening around her. It was happening within her. For years, she had searched for a place where she belonged. She believed that if she worked harder, helped more, and proved herself enough, her family would finally recognize her. But now she understood that her value had never depended on anyone's approval. She had already been worthy from the beginning. As Emily continued building her life with Alexander Kingsley, she found herself becoming more comfortable in a world that once seemed impossible to enter. She attended important events, participated in major discussions, and stood beside Alexander not as someone protected by his power, but as someone respected for her own abilities. People who once questioned her presence slowly began changing their opinions. They realized Emily was not simply the woman chosen by the richest emperor. She was a person with her own vision, intelligence, and strength. One evening, Alexander and Emily attended a formal gathering at the Kingsley residence. Many influential guests were present, including people who had previously doubted whether Emily belonged beside him. As conversations filled the room, Emily noticed that some people still looked at her with curiosity. But this time, she did not feel nervous. She no longer needed to prove she deserved to be there. Alexander noticed her calm expression. "You seem different tonight," he said. Emily smiled. "Because I am not trying to convince anyone anymore." Alexander looked at her with admiration. "That is exactly what makes you powerful." During the evening, Emily spoke with several guests about future projects and ideas. Her confidence came naturally because she was no longer pretending to be someone else. She was simply sharing what she knew. The same qualities that once made people underestimate her were now the reasons they respected her. Meanwhile, Richard Carter continued reflecting on his relationship with his daughter. He realized that his biggest mistake was not failing to recognize Emily's achievements. It was failing to recognize Emily herself. He had spent years focusing on appearances and expectations while ignoring the person who cared the most about the family. Richard eventually asked Emily for another conversation. This time, there was no business request and no expectation. He simply wanted to apologize. "I know saying sorry cannot change the years you felt alone," Richard said. "But I want you to know that I understand now." Emily listened quietly. She remembered the pain she carried for so long, but she also remembered the person she had become because of it. "I appreciate that you finally understand," she said. "But I do not want to live in the past anymore." Richard nodded. He knew she was right. Emily had forgiven him, but she had also grown beyond the need for his acceptance. Later that night, Emily returned to Alexander. They stood together overlooking the city from the balcony of the Kingsley residence. "You handled everything with so much grace," Alexander said. Emily smiled. "I learned that becoming stronger does not mean becoming cold." Alexander looked at her and realized something important. He had spent years building an empire, collecting achievements, and reaching the highest level of success. Yet the person who brought the most meaning into his life was someone the world once ignored. "Do you know what I admire most about you?" Alexander asked. Emily looked at him. What? You had every reason to become bitter, but you chose to remain kind. Emily smiled softly. She finally understood that kindness had never been her weakness. It had always been her greatest strength. As their future continued unfolding, Emily and Alexander prepared for the final step of their journey together. The world knew their story, but soon everyone would understand that their connection was never built on status or wealth. It was built on seeing each other for who they truly were. The journey that changed Emily Carter's life had reached a moment she never believed was possible. The woman who once walked away from her family estate feeling invisible was now standing beside Alexander Kingsley as an equal partner, a trusted wife, and someone who finally understood her own worth. But the greatest victory was not the title she gained or the world's attention. It was the fact that Emily no longer needed anyone else to decide whether she mattered. Months earlier, Emily believed losing her family's approval meant losing everything. She thought the Carter name was the only thing that could give her value. But through every challenge, every doubt, and every unexpected opportunity, she discovered a truth that changed her forever. Her worth had always existed. It was simply hidden from people who were unwilling to see it. Alexander Kingsley understood that better than anyone. The richest emperor in the world had spent years building an empire admired by millions, yet he had always felt separated from the people around him. Many respected his power, but few cared about the person behind the title. Emily was different from the beginning. She never looked at his wealth first. She saw his character, his responsibilities, and the quiet moments when he needed someone who understood him. Their relationship became stronger because they chose each other every day, not because of expectations or appearances. One evening, Emily and Alexander stood together on the balcony of the Kingsley residence, looking at the city lights below. The view reminded Emily of the night she left the Carter estate with only a small suitcase and an uncertain future. Do you ever think about how different everything could have been? Emily asked. Alexander smiled gently. I think about how we both needed to experience those moments to become who we are now. Emily looked at him thoughtfully. She understood what he meant. The difficult moments had shaped her, but they had not defined her. She was not the daughter her father failed to appreciate. She was the woman who built her own future. The news of Emily's transformation continued spreading throughout society. People who once questioned why Alexander chose her now understood the reason. He had not chosen someone with the most impressive background or the strongest connections. He chose someone with honesty, compassion, and the courage to remain herself. Richard Carter also changed over time. He no longer viewed Emily as someone who needed to prove her place in the family. He finally saw her as the remarkable woman she had always been. Their relationship could not erase the past, but it could move forward with understanding and respect. Emily accepted that some wounds take time to heal, but she also knew she had already found peace. During a special gathering celebrating the future of the Kingsley Empire, Alexander introduced Emily not simply as his wife, but as the person who inspired him to see life differently. Success is not measured by what we own, Alexander said. It is measured by the people who make our lives meaningful. Emily listened with a smile, knowing how far she had come. The girl who was once called a burden had become the person who brought balance and warmth into the life of the most powerful man in the world. She did not need revenge. She did not need to prove anyone wrong. She only needed to continue being herself. And that was the greatest reason Alexander Kingsley chose her. Because when everyone else saw someone they could ignore, he saw the person who would become his greatest treasure.